The moment Donald Trump leaned into the camera and hurled the word psycho at Barack Obama, the effect was instant. He had said plenty of controversial things before, but this remark was different. The word carried weight, a label that cut deep, and the fact that it was broadcast live made it impossible to retract or soften. For Trump, it may have seemed like just another punchline, another attempt to grab attention and dominate the news cycle. But instead, it opened a storm he wasn't ready for. Asterisk viewers sitting at home had two different reactions. Supporters of Trump cheered the boldness, convinced he was exposing his rival with brutal honesty. Critics, however, were shocked at how casually a former president was willing to dismiss another with such a loaded insult. Within minutes, social media was flooded with clips, memes, and debates. The word psycho became a trending topic not just in the United States but internationally. Every news outlet replayed the clip, and panelists dissected his tone, his expression, and the potential fallout. Asterisk what Trump may not have anticipated was how quickly the insult would backfire. The label wasn't just taken as an attack on Obama, it was seen as a reflection of Trump's own temperament. Commentators began drawing attention to the irony of a man famous for fiery outbursts accusing someone known for his calm demeanor of being unstable. Late-night hosts seized the moment, airing montages of Trump's unpredictable moments alongside Obama's steady responses, leaving the audience to laugh at the sharp contrast. Asterisk, as the hours passed, the damage became clearer. Swing voters who often expressed frustration with both men admitted that Trump's remark felt childish, even reckless. Psychologists invited onto television shows explained why using words like psycho carried a dangerous stigma, not just politically but socially, as it trivialized mental health. Instead of painting Obama as unhinged, Trump's choice of words made him look insensitive and impulsive. Asterisk, behind the scenes, Trump's advisors scrambled. Some encouraged him to double down, while others warned that the backlash was gaining momentum. He did what he usually did, repeated the insult on his social media, convinced that repetition would cement the narrative. Yet each repetition only fueled more criticism. Analysts described his move as desperate, pointing out that strong leaders don't need to rely on name-calling to make their point. Asterisk, meanwhile, Obama stayed silent, which only deepened the contrast. His silence was not passive, it was strategic. While Trump fumed and pushed the word into headlines, Obama's lack of response became a statement in itself. It showed restraint, patience, and an understanding of timing. By not reacting immediately, Obama allowed the public to focus not on a rivalry but on the rawness of Trump's insult. Every passing hour made the remark feel more like an outburst and less like a political argument. Asterisk, when Obama finally did speak the next day, the damage had already been done. His calm dismissal of the insult, delivered with humor and then layered with a deeper lesson about leadership, cemented the idea that Trump's outburst had failed. The audience's laughter at Obama's line, "When someone calls you a psycho on live television, it tells you more about them than it does about you," echoed online with millions of shares. What was meant as a weapon had turned into a wound. Asterisk, the real backfire was not just public perception but the lasting image it left. For many viewers, that single exchange summarized the difference between the two men, one quick to attack without considering consequences, the other waiting, choosing his moment, and striking with precision. Instead of tarnishing Obama, Trump's outburst became a case study in how insults can expose the character of the one who delivers them. Asterisk, by the time the media cycle moved forward, the phrase psycho wasn't attached to Obama, it was attached to the recklessness of Trump. His attempt to dominate the spotlight had worked, but not in the way he hoped. He had handed his opponent the chance to look composed and presidential while he came across as impulsive and bitter. The insult backfired not because of the word itself, but because of what it revealed about the man who spoke it. Do you want me to expand Keynote 2 in the same 700-word storytelling flow next? When the insult first broke across television screens and social media feeds, many expected Barack Obama to come out swinging. The word psycho wasn't a small jab. It was a direct attempt to undercut his legacy and paint him as irrational. Yet hours passed, then an entire evening, and Obama said nothing. Reporters camped outside his office hoping for a reaction, but there was only silence. His team declined interviews, offered no quotes, and let the frenzy build on its own. That decision puzzled some and frustrated others. But to those who had followed Obama's career closely, it was a familiar play. He was waiting, letting the noise grow loud enough so that when he finally spoke, his words would cut through like a knife. Asterisk, the silence wasn't accidental. It became part of the story itself. While Donald Trump repeated the word in new interviews and blasted it across his social media, Obama's refusal to engage made Trump look like he was arguing with himself. Every repetition only seemed more desperate in the absence of a counterattack. Commentators noticed this dynamic, pointing out that silence can sometimes be louder than 1,000 words. By withholding an immediate reaction, Obama gave the public space to form their own judgments about Trump's outburst. And what many saw was a man losing his composure on live television while his rival remained calm in the shadows. Asterisk, in living rooms across America, conversations reflected this contrast. Supporters of Obama praised his restraint, saying it was proof of his discipline and maturity. Even some independents who were tired of political bickering admitted that his silence came across as statesmanlike. Meanwhile, Trump's base urged him to keep pressing the attack, but the wider audience grew fatigued by the constant repetition of the same insult. Each time he used the word psycho, it seemed less like a sharp observation and more like a broken record. Obama's silence also created a sense of anticipation. News outlets began speculating about when and how he would respond. Was he preparing a carefully worded statement? Would he use humor? Would he ignore it completely? The longer he stayed quiet, the more curiosity grew. By the time Obama finally scheduled a speech at a university auditorium the following evening, the stage was set not just for a lecture but for a moment of reckoning. When he walked to the podium, he didn't look rattled. There was no anger in his stride, no bitterness in his expression. Instead, he opened with his planned remarks on leadership and civic duty, as though the insult had never happened. The crowd listened, waiting for the moment they knew was coming. Halfway through, he finally addressed it. "When someone calls you a psycho on live television," he said with a smile, "it tells you more about them than it does about you." The audience erupted in laughter and applause. Not because the line was harsh, but because it was perfectly timed. That single sentence showed why waiting had been so effective. Had Obama rushed out a defensive statement the night before, it might have looked emotional, like he was stung by the insult. But by waiting, he turned the remark into something trivial, unworthy of urgency. It wasn't a wound. It was a joke, and he treated it as such. His humor disarmed the insult, and his composure transformed the narrative. After the laughter subsided, Obama shifted into a more serious tone. He explained that leadership is revealed not in the names you call, but in the way you carry yourself. He talked about empathy, responsibility, and the importance of choosing words carefully when millions are listening. Without naming Trump again, he made it clear that insults are the refuge of those who lack substance. His silence had given him the perfect opening to teach a broader lesson, and his words resonated beyond politics. The strategy worked because it played to Obama's strengths. He had built a reputation over years of staying calm under pressure, of thinking before reacting. In this case, his refusal to meet Trump on the level of insult made Trump look smaller, and when he finally responded, it was on his own terms. In his own rhythm, silence had not been weakness, it had been a tool, sharpening the impact of his eventual reply. By the end of the night, the conversation had shifted entirely. Trump's insult was still being replayed, but now it was framed by Obama's clever and composed response. Commentators praised the timing, calling it a masterclass in patience and communication. What had started as an attempt to smear him became another reminder of the discipline that had defined his political career. Obama's silence, more than any speech, had exposed the impulsiveness of his rival and set the stage for a response that would be remembered far longer than the original insult. "Do you want me to move on and expand Keynote 3 in the same style next?" When Barack Obama finally chose to respond, he didn't settle for a defensive rebuttal. Instead, he did something far more calculated. He turned Donald Trump's insult into a broader lesson about leadership and character. Standing in front of a packed auditorium, he could have easily matched the fire with fire, meeting insult with insult. But that was never his style. Instead, he used the moment to illustrate how leaders should rise above the noise, even when provoked on the most public stage. The crowd had been waiting all night for him to address the remark. When he finally did, it came with a chuckle. "When someone calls you a psycho on live television," Obama said, "it tells you more about them than it does about you." The line instantly lit up the room with laughter, but it wasn't just about humor. The remark disarmed the insult, stripped it of its sting, and shifted the power away from Trump. By refusing to be wounded, Obama made the attack look small, even childish. That alone would have been enough to win the moment. But he didn't stop there. He leaned forward, his tone softening into seriousness. "Leadership isn't about calling people names," he continued. "It's about showing who you are in the choices you make, in the way you treat others, and in the example you set." The audience listened closely, many nodding in agreement. He explained that resorting to insults often came from a place of insecurity, that true strength was measured by discipline, patience, and clarity of vision. Without ever mentioning Trump's name again, Obama painted a picture of what real leadership looks like, implicitly contrasting it with what viewers had witnessed the night before. What made this moment resonate wasn't just the content of his words, but the way he transformed an attack into a teaching opportunity. Instead of letting Trump define the terms of the conversation, he shifted it entirely. Suddenly, the story wasn't about whether Obama was a psycho, a label that never truly fit him anyway. It was about what the insult revealed about the state of political discourse. He elevated the conversation from a personal jab to a reflection on values, which made his response feel timeless rather than reactive. Clips of the speech spread quickly online. People who had tuned in expecting a clash of egos found themselves sharing a lesson on empathy and responsibility. Commentators marveled at how skillfully Obama had turned an insult into a platform for inspiration. Even some who had grown weary of political speeches admitted that this one stood out because it wasn't about policy or party A, it was about human decency. The effect was magnified by the contrast. Trump's soundbite was raw and cutting, but Obama's words were thoughtful and measured, making the insult feel out of place against the backdrop of his calm reasoning. Asterisk for those in the audience. The lesson stuck. Students in particular took to social media afterward, quoting his lines about leadership and dignity. They described how hearing him reframe an insult into a positive message gave them a model for how to handle conflict in their own lives. It wasn't just a response to Trump, it was advice for anyone facing hostility, whether in politics, business, or personal relationships. Obama had effectively turned a personal attack into a universal teaching moment. Asterisk meanwhile, the political fallout grew sharper. Analysts noted how Obama's strategy highlighted Trump's weakness. Where Trump had tried to dominate with aggression, Obama had gained the upper hand by showing restraint and wisdom. The insult, once shocking, now seemed trivial compared to the bigger lesson Obama had drawn from it. In fact, the more people discussed Obama's response, the more they forgot the actual insult. The conversation had moved on to a higher plane, and Trump was left behind, still repeating his word to a shrinking audience. Asterisk by the end of the week, it was clear that Obama's approach had worked. Instead of being dragged into the mud, he had climbed above it, and in doing so, he made his rival look petty. More importantly, he demonstrated that even in an age of soundbites and viral clips, it was still possible to win people over with thoughtfulness and grace. His ability to turn an insult into a lesson didn't just neutralize the attack, it made him stronger, more respected, and more admired for the way he handled the spotlight. Shall I now expand Keynote 4 in the same storytelling style? The clash between Donald Trump and Barack Obama wasn't just about a single insult. It was about the way two men, both former presidents, revealed their characters in real time. When Trump called Obama a psycho on live television, the words came sharp and unfiltered. Designed to shock, they did exactly that, but they also exposed something deeper about Trump himself. The moment showed a man who thrived on provocation, someone who measured strength by how loudly he could dominate. The conversation, in contrast, Obama's reaction, or rather, his deliberate non-reaction at first showed a completely different approach. The difference between the two was striking, and it told audiences far more than the insult ever could. Asterisk Trump's style had always been brash. His supporters loved his unpolished, off-the-cuff remarks, seeing them as proof that he wasn't scripted or restrained, but this time, the rawness of his comment carried a cost. The word psycho wasn't just an attack, it sounded reckless. Instead of dismantling his opponent with argument or evidence, he relied on a label that many found cruel and childish. For those watching, it reinforced an image of Trump as impulsive, quick to lash out, and eager to reduce complex rivalries to schoolyard name-calling. Asterisk Obama, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on patience. His silence after the remark was almost as loud as the insult itself. By not responding right away, he created space, a deliberate pause that made Trump's repetition look more desperate. When he finally spoke, his calm demeanor stood in sharp contrast to Trump's fire. A simple smile, and the line, "When someone calls you a psycho on live television, it tells you more about them than it does about you," flipped the script. The insult didn't stick to him, it bounced back on the man who had thrown it. Asterisk, that contrast between brashness and composure defined the moment. Commentators immediately began comparing their styles. Trump, the aggressor, leaning into outrage to maintain relevance, and Obama, the strategist, showing that restraint can be more powerful than reaction. Even audiences not particularly loyal to either side couldn't miss the difference. One man seemed trapped in the heat of the moment, while the other looked as though he was playing a longer game, staying focused on values rather than squabbles. Asterisk, the aftermath made the contrast even clearer. Trump doubled down, repeating the insult on social media, convinced that hammering the word would force it into the public consciousness. Yet each repetition made it sound more like a slogan and less like a serious critique. Obama didn't need to say anything further. His single response carried enough weight to last days. His choice to move on while Trump lingered only widened the gap in perception. Asterisk, people began to reflect on what leadership actually looks like. Was it the fiery energy of someone who dominates headlines with insults? Or was it the calm steadiness of someone who can laugh at an attack and turn it into a teaching moment? Many concluded that the difference in character said more about the men than any policy debate ever could. Obama's ability to keep his composure was seen as a sign of maturity, while Trump's impulsiveness was interpreted as a weakness. Asterisk, this contrast also reached beyond politics. Teachers, business leaders, and commentators drew lessons from the episode, pointing out how it reflected two very different approaches to conflict. Trump's way was to escalate, to shout louder and sharper, hoping to overpower. Obama's way was to de-escalate, to remain steady until the timing was right, then deliver a message that cut deeper because of its calmness. The two approaches played out on the world stage, and viewers got to decide which they admired more. Asterisk by the time the news cycle moved on, the labels had shifted. Trump was no longer remembered for delivering a sharp blow, but for revealing his own volatility. Obama was remembered not as the target of the insult, but as the man who rose above it, turning the moment into an example of dignity. The contrast was unavoidable. One man's strength seemed tied to loudness, while the other's strength came from restraint. Together, they created a moment where character was on display as clearly as any speech or policy. Do you also want me to write the 500-word ending statements for this story, in the same storytelling tone? In the end, the moment wasn't remembered simply as Donald Trump calling Barack Obama a psycho on live television. It became something larger, a snapshot of two men, and the very different ways they chose to carry themselves when the spotlight was at its brightest. For Trump, the insult was meant to be a weapon, a line sharp enough to dominate headlines and corner his opponent. For a brief moment, it worked. The word was replayed endlessly, written in bold across screens, and dissected by pundits, but the way the story unfolded revealed how fragile that kind of victory can be when it isn't grounded in substance. Asterisk Obama's patience reframed everything. By waiting, by letting the comment echo unanswered for just long enough, he gave the public a chance to see the insult for what it was, an outburst, not an argument. And when he finally spoke, he didn't just respond, he redefined the conversation. Instead of defending himself directly, he highlighted a larger truth, that leadership isn't proven in insults or attacks, but in composure and restraint. His words didn't just address Trump, they addressed everyone watching, turning a petty moment into a lesson about dignity and strength. Asterisk, the striking part was how audiences reacted. Even people not usually invested in political debates found themselves moved by the way Obama handled it. His calmness resonated because it contrasted so sharply with Trump's heated approach. The laughter in that auditorium wasn't just about humor, it was relief. A reminder that words don't have to spiral into chaos. And the applause wasn't just for Obama, it was for the idea that leadership can still be measured by character. Asterisk 4. Trump. The aftermath served as a cautionary tale. Insults may draw attention, but they also draw scrutiny. By leaning so heavily on a word like psycho, he opened himself up to questions about his own judgment and temperament. Each repetition of the word felt less like strength and more like desperation. What was meant to make Obama look weak ended up underscoring Trump's own volatility. Asterisk for Obama. The moment reinforced a reputation he had built over years, the ability to remain calm under fire, to let the storm rage, and then speak with precision. In a political world where noise often wins the day, he reminded people that silence, when used wisely, can be even more powerful. His response wasn't just about deflecting an insult, it was about showing that leadership is as much about timing as it is about words. Asterisk looking back, the clash stands as more than just another feud in American politics. It's remembered because of what it revealed. Trump's need to dominate the conversation at any cost. And Obama's decision to rise above it created a vivid contrast that audiences couldn't ignore. It reminded people that the measure of a leader isn't found in the insults they can throw, but in the restraint they can show. In that way, the story became less about a single insult